Before we begin, I want to invite you to check in with yourself. This episode, we're going to be speaking directly to the subtle and the systemic targeting of boys in grooming cultures, especially those who never really get seen as vulnerable. So if you feel the heaviness of this topic in your body, you're not alone. And you're not obligated to push through. You see, healing honors pace as well. So if today is not the day to hear this, that's okay. But if it is, let's walk forward with honesty together. Well, let's begin. If you want to destabilize an entire generation of men, you don't need war, I think. You just need one thing, and that is to neglect their emotional lives. Like starve their connection, mock their tears, reward their detachment, punish their softness, and then once they're disconnected from themselves especially, well then offer them this counterfeit version of power. That's, I think, what grooming systems like the 764 movement are doing. See, they do this every day, even like right at this moment, in the comment sections, in the message boards, in private chats, and in DMs. They're not just targeting angry men, but boys. Boys who don't know what they're hungry for because no one ever really named the pain. Boys who've been told that becoming a man means hiding or hardening or proving something. Boys who are lonely and curious and disconnected and starved for something real, and who end up instead falling into the arms of something false. The 764 movement isn't just exploiting their trauma. It's exploiting their emotional malnourishment, especially in young men. And it doesn't need to be violent. It doesn't need to be extreme. It just needs to feel like finally someone sees them for who they truly are. Because that's all it really takes. And when a boy hasn't actually experienced safe intimacy, he'll confuse validation with vision. He'll confuse intensity with truth. He'll confuse control with care. And the moment that someone offers him attention that's wrapped up in some sort of certainty, well, he's in. And that's the part I think that most people miss. Like the boys who are being recruited into these spaces, they're not defective. They're not dangerous by default. They're they're not they're not even born broken. They're just they're untended. And untended boys become more susceptible, not because they're weak, but because they're hungry. Hungry for language, hungry for a place, hungry to know who they are when no one else has really told them. And here's the cost of that neglect. If you don't teach a boy how to interpret his emotions, like with clarity and with connection, someone else will. Someone else will teach him to turn those emotions into a kind of fuel for blame, fuel for bitterness, fuel for movements that weaponize their pain and then call that their identity. 764 is just one of those such movements. And it works because it packages itself as a kind of brotherhood, a tribe, a family, a space where boys don't have to pretend that they're okay, where they can actually be angry, right? Where they can actually say what they feel without actually being shamed for it. But there's a bait and switch here though, because once they're in, the pain that was once named is no longer held with compassion, but now it's rerouted towards blame. You feel invisible? It's their fault. You feel confused? Well, that's because they lied to you, right? You've been rejected. It's because the system is broken. You feel emasculated. Uh, Take your power back, is what they say, right? And just like that, their legitimate pain is turned into this funnel for control. 764 doesn't just validate pain, it actually reframes it as proof that their disconnection is strength and that dominance is their healing. But dominance is not healing. It's a performance of power to hide from shame. And these boys deserve better. They deserve spaces where emotional honesty isn't punished, where confusion is met with clarity, where tenderness isn't feminized, it's humanized. But that only happens when we're willing to name what's finally happening. See, boys are being recruited, and it's not through force, and it's not through ideology. Instead, it's happening through emotional leverage, through these online spaces that say no one else gets you, but we do, right? And it's through viral videos that turn heartbreak into hatred, through creators who build empires out of other people's loneliness, and through underground pipelines that take curiosity and then convert that into captivity. And by the time someone notices, the boy is already echoing a belief system that doesn't really belong to him. Instead, this belief system was implanted in him. And here's a tragic irony. Most boys don't even know that it's grooming because they didn't walk into a dungeon. No, what they walked into was a community. They didn't meet a predator. They met a mentor, right? They didn't hear the lies. They just heard emotional resonance that was twisted just enough to feel kind of like truth. And that's what it takes to make it so effective. See, this is not about intelligence. This is about isolation. Boys who are connected and grounded and seen and emotionally literate, see, they're not easy targets. But boys who have no framework for emotional safety, boys who don't know what real intimacy looks like or feels like, well, they're wide open. And that's why this episode matters. That's why 764 series exists this month. Because 764 wasn't just an online portal where we first traced this manipulative architecture. See, it's a reminder that systems which harvest pain will always find people who were never taught how to hold their pain. 764 is where harm was named. But it's also the number that we now wear as a kind of warning. And even as a vision, I would say. A vision for a movement that's built on integrity and intimacy. Because if grooming happens where vulnerability is unmet, well, then healing happens where truth is met with tenderness. Where boys are not told to toughen up, but they're taught to tell the truth. Where masculinity is not boiled down to performance, but more so it's rooted in presence. And where strength is not measured by dominance, but instead by the ability to stay open, especially under pressure. That's what we want to teach here. That's what we want to model. So if you're someone who's working with boys or someone who once was that boy, this is your call to shift the storyline or the narrative, to stop waiting for boys to figure it out, to stop ignoring the red flags because he's just going through a phase. And to stop assuming that just because he isn't crying, he isn't carrying something heavy. Because silence is not proof of safety. And, and sarcasm is not a strength. It's often shame in disguise. And shame is 764's favorite currency because shame makes you search for answers in the dark. And 764, they live in the dark. So let's name the truth in the light. If a boy is withdrawn, he might be overwhelmed. If he's angry, he might be grieving. If he's numbed out, he might be scared. If he's hostile, he might be hurting. But you won't know until you show up, until you ask, until you stay when he says nothing, until you listen without trying to fix anything, until you make room for the pause between the pain and the permission to speak. See, that's where integrity lives. That's where intimacy begins. And that's where boys stop being targets because they've started being seen in the light. So check the devices or ask better questions. Create open doors. Say things like, I love you, man, more often than you ask about their grades. Let these boys cry without any commentary. Teach them how to name their emotions without being laughed at. And let these boys see you apologize. Let them see you hold space. Let these boys see you model how it is like to feel your emotions. That's how we can begin to break the cycle. That's how we can actually make sure that these boys never fall for a version of manhood that in essence teaches them to abandon themselves just so that they can feel in control. Because if we don't show our boys this kind of real power, someone else will sell them a counterfeit version. And our boys don't need to be fixed. They need to be fathered. They need to be mentored. They need to be walked alongside with. They need to be taught that wholeness is still an option. And if you're a man who never got that, let me say this clearly to you. You're not too late. You're not too far gone. You're not even the version of masculinity that in essence failed you. You actually get to rebuild. And if you've already started, then you're already disrupting the system. Because every healed man is in essence a message to the younger version of himself that is saying you were always worthy of love, that didn't use you. You were always worthy of a life that didn't start with hunger. Dear listener, if this episode is giving you some language, some form of language for what you've seen in the lives of boys, whether in your classroom or in your home or in the mirror, consider joining me tomorrow for tomorrow's episode. That one I've titled, Why Families Don't See It. Because oftentimes the grooming happens right in the next room. Sometimes the manipulation is unfolding in silence. And the people who love them most will miss it. And it's not because they're bad. No, it's because they were never taught what to look for. So we want to change that in tomorrow's episode together. But until then, dear listener, stand in integrity, offer intimacy, and let no boy go unseen. I'll see you tomorrow.